So we will be mostly looking at common stock shares in this chapter. Let's look at this example. In this example, we are interested in figuring out how much you would pay for one share of such stock. Let's say you buy one share of common stock today. You expect to get a $5 dividend over the next year, and you also expect to be able to sell that share for $80 in 1 year. By the way, these $2 amounts, a $5 dividend and an $80 selling price in the future are, this is just an example. In real life, you probably wouldn't know how much of a dividend you would be getting, and definitely not how much you would be able to sell your share of stock for. But let's just assume we know or have kind of a good idea of what we are likely to receive, right? So we are assuming we have a good estimate for next dividend and the resale price of a share in 1 year. And return on investment is 15%. So this company typically generates 15% return on its money every year. And the question is, how much would you pay for this share today? So how much you would pay for anything is no more than what it's worth, right? So what is one share of stock worth to you? Well, it's worth the sum of all future payments to you, right? So in other words, the stock value today is all future payments that the firm will make to you. Except, don't forget about the whole time value of money. So we need to add up the discounted values of all future payments to the stockholder. So stock value today equals the present value of all future payments. And in our example, the future payments are next year's dividend, $5, and next year's price, $80, divided by 1 plus 15% discount rate. The calculations give us $73.91. So if shares of stock are sold for more than $73.91, you should not be buying these shares because they're not worth this much. You would be overpaying, right? And you can also say that the shares are overpriced. If, however, shares are cheaper than $73.91, then you should take advantage of this great deal. So using, genuine notation, stock value today is next year's dividend, so the dividend in 1 year, or D subscript 1, plus price in 1 year, or capital P subscript 1. And the sum is then divided by 1 plus discount rate, 1 plus R. Mathematically, we can separate it into two fractions, where the first fraction is the next year's dividend, discounted back by 1 year, so divided by 1 plus R. And the second term that we add is next year's price, discounted back by 1 year, or divided by 1 plus R, right? And what about next year's price? We can actually apply the same, approach, the same logic, and say that price in 1 year is the same thing as dividend in 2 years plus price in 2 years, discounted back by 1 year, right? We are using exactly the same formula, except now we are sort of 1 year in the future. Then we simplify, right? We substitute price in year 1 over 1 plus R with dividend in year 2 over 1 plus R plus price in year 2 over 1 plus R, and we get this sum of 3 terms. And now we can do the whole thing again. We can say, well, price in 2 years is the discounted sum of dividend in 3 years and price in 3 years, right? And then we can keep doing this over and over and over again. And what we will get is an endless stream of future dividends, never-ending dividends, a perpetuity of dividends, each discounted by the appropriate number of years. In other words, to summarize this slide, or the only thing I want you to take from this slide, and by the way, I'm never going to torture you with like deriving any of this again, so this is just, this slide. But the bottom line is, and this is the only thing I want you to sort of take away from this slide, is that today's stock price is the present value of all future dividends. You would never want to pay more for a for a stock share than how much you get back. You get back dividends, you add them up, except you do it correctly using the whole discounting. Okay, so you can forget about that slide. Just, keep in mind the general idea. Today's stock price equals the present value of all future dividends, right? And now we're going to look at some calculations of stock price. Well, clearly we need to know future dividends, and clearly in real life that's not possible, right? Nobody knows what future dividends will look like. And so instead we are kind of going to simplify things and assume that we know a lot about what this particular company's future dividends will look like. So we're going to make some simplified assumptions that will make the calculations of today's stock price possible. Okay, let's consider these three cases. Case 1, constant dividend or zero growth dividend. That's when the firm will pay a constant dividend forever. This is basically preferred stock, and that's when we use the perpetuity present value formula to find the stock price today. The second case we will consider is known as constant dividend growth. Like the name implies, dividend is growing at a constant rate. So a company is maybe expanding, right? And actually a lot of successful companies are probably looking this way. They're expanding, they're growing, they're making more and more money, and so they can afford to continuously increase their dividend per share. And this is what we learned in chapter 6 as a growing perpetuity. So we can use the present value of a growing perpetuity formula to calculate the stock price today. And the third case is basically everything else. And we call it a non-constant dividend growth. So dividends will be growing, but not at a constant rate. So there's kind of something else going on. And we will look at, in particular, one case where there are two stages of dividend growths. So one growth rate followed by another growth rate after a number of years. It's also going to be called a supernormal growth. So let me not jump ahead and just kind of start covering these three cases in this order. Let's start with case number 1.